Sugaru Maki knows how to write two stories. One where the main leads end up pretty happy, but like they're dead, and the other one is like the two leads end up pretty happy, but they're not dead. So I guess they're both good stories, but this video is about Sugaru Miyake's starting over. Now, what is this story about? Vaguely, so vaguely, it's about a guy at age 20. Life is great, you know, and he goes back to the age of 10 all over again. His life was fine, like that. He says that was pretty good, and he goes back to 10 years old and basically lives the rest of his life. So I think I like this a little bit more than Three Days of Happiness, and I'll tell you why. So, spoilers, obviously. I'm not going to recap the whole thing because it's a pretty long story, but th- this story was like a huge train wreck from start to finish. I don't mean like bad. I mean like it was like you were watching a train crash, but you just couldn't look away. So I like starting over because it was you expect this guy to like want to do better in his second life, right? Well, not really, because his second life was completely a bad thing for him. His first life was pretty good, and I don't know this guy's name. Like, that's fine. The main character, whatever. The main character, in his second life, he decides he wants to live everything the same way as it was in his first life, and this takes an absolute bad turn for him. I think this is a pretty good turn of events for like the main character because it lets him, in a way, it lets him develop as a person more than he did in his first life. But again, so the chain of events that starts off his life getting like ruined is him getting rejected by his girlfriend from his past life, and whatever oh the guy's 20 years old inside 10-year-old's toy's body, that kind of thing. Whatever, right? He doesn't seem to be like weird about it. But that aside, it all goes downhill from there, and he ruins his life for a pretty awful reason. And I appreciate Tsurugi Maki for like I guess making this part somewhat realistic is that like if you go back to the age of 10 when you were the age of 20, you're obviously gonna have some mental faculties or at least developmentally screwed up. I think the good part about starting over is that the MC allows himself to grow and develop and change as a person and reflect on basically what made his first life good. In his first life, he was hot shit. Everyone liked him. He talked to people, but the more he gets isolated in second life, he realizes that not only did he take stuff for granted, he actively like looked down on people who were like him in his second life. He was a loner. He was isolated, and he basically wasn't interested in making social amends with anyone. And one difference you can see in here is that like in his first life, his sister was energetic, lively, and in second life, he essentially also ruined her life, her lifestyle. She's now isolated, secluded, much like him, solely because he didn't interact with like his family. He didn't want to like. He just didn't put in the effort to, do the things he used to do. And you could say like, oh, this makes him extremely insufferable in his second life because he thinks everything will calm him in first, like as it did in his first life. I think that's true. Like this guy's really insufferable. This guy, he carries over these really bad habits from his first life in which he thinks he will things will go the way he wants to. And I mean, fair, right? I mean, he sets up things exactly as they would have in his first life, and he expects them to, go as he planned. And again, in theory, this would have been fine, but again, I guess in the second life, you got to make sure these things actually work out, and they don't. And I really like they don't. Sergei Maki doesn't write much about his past life, but essentially the MC gets tied up in this idealization of his past girlfriend. So to the point that like until the very end, he doesn't really see his idolized new girl like this new old girlfriend like the new version of his old girlfriend in his new life as an actual like fake. It's funny, and it spends like a really long amount of time with him affirming like, oh yeah, I love this version of my girlfriend in my past life so much. I can't see the actual person in front of me who was my actual girlfriend in past life, and who actually sees me for who I am. Not that. Starting over is it takes a long time to get to the point where he realizes that man, I just want to stop chasing after this girl that I had in the past life, and I should actually chase after the one. Not even chase. I should actually like do make the steps to be happy, and he doesn't. Starting over with that is just it's a huge train wreck. Incredibly unlikable protagonist for which he complains about things not going his way, but he obviously didn't put in the effort to redo his life or make it better. It's really my favorite parts is when he talks to his sister. His sister, his new sister in Second Life, the MC sister, is extremely just the opposite of what she was in the first life. And from that, you can just tell his impact on the people in the Second Life. He's absolutely trash, complete garbage. Even his best friend with his first life became this homeless tramp who quite literally just also bullied him in his second life instead of being his friend. Then such and such. That was a weird scene where he goes with his past best friend. And they talk together, and it's like, huh, maybe we could have been friends, but I'm gonna go out and camp outside. Well, that's pretty meaningless. Such and such. But starting over is again, it ends relatively happy. It ends with him and the main girl kind of making up and for their lost time and saying, yeah, we should have focused on like other things than just our now we are exes, our relationships in our past life. And it doesn't end like entirely like, oh, we're gonna be happy. It ends with the MC going to his sister, telling him about these things that happened and such. And when she doesn't get like, oh, she doesn't get like the kind of struggles she's gonna go through in the future. He just says, "Oh well, you will." It's part of growing up, and I like that. The way starting over kind of reframes this idea of a good life with something that was maybe not as fully developed as it could have been in this first life. It puts in his perspective. Obviously, MC could have gone to where he is in the end without like going through all this struggling and all this isolation. But the fact that he does is great. It makes it a great story. It makes the MC really human. Makes him a huge asshole. You really hate him. You really hate. You really you kind of wonder how he even got the good graces he had in his first life. But eventually, it ties up in the way which you kind of satisfies the story. The story it's kind of miserable, much like any Sugaru Miaki story. With 3 Days of Happiness, I feel like it was very idolized, very like dreamy, escapist. Not that it's a bad thing. Starting over doesn't really get into that like, oh, everything's really good now. I could, you know, all my suffering has been worth something. Doesn't get to that until the end, and I like that. The romance is like non-existent, let's be honest, but it's fine. And his girlfriend Hiragi doesn't really take an active role until the last third of the story, but her introduction is like it flip flops between a foil between his imagined ideal girlfriend in the past, and then she finally comes out as like the actual girlfriend he's been looking for, but not really looking for because he's looking for his non-depressed, lively girlfriend. Which by the end he realizes, yeah, I should just stop trying to get things I can't get, and he settles and gets to know his past girlfriend again. It's cute. I like it. By the end, you're pretty satisfied. It's very inspirational. Like, don't, again, one of those banal, simple story where it's like, oh, you should value time and you should not get stuck up on the good things in your life, and you should move on from them and keep doing more good things instead of wallowing about how you don't have them. Yeah, it's a great story. Again, the afterword was amazing. Sugaru Mike, can really write a good afterword. Would not have liked the story without the afterword as much. Yeah, Sugar Maki, despite being writing the same feeling kind of story, I think starting over was better than 3 Days of Happiness. Maybe not a big of a gap as I thought, but it's a great story. There was one part in starting over where the MC was like crying about like driving to his parents' home, and he starts humming, "I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo," like he's some like he's some slick bastard or something. Really funny scene. I'm glad Sugar has such taste in music. But yeah, it's overall. I guess Miyake has become one of my favorite authors now because of his ability to write losers. The romance certainly one of the things you get used to. Again, Sugar has this amazing idea of soulmates. Not very original, but let people dream, right? So there should be more stories. There should be more stories where like it's kind of semi-isekai, or you go back to like the past to try and change your mistakes, but just it fails miserably. It's really funny. We're starting over. The perspective is really twisted. Like it goes from like a bad life to a good life, from like a good life to a bad life in terms of reincarnation, that kind of thing. It's very intuitive, very thought provoking. By the end, I just want to wrapping this all together. By the end, the MC realizes that sure he had great things in his first life, but he wasn't. Again, he could have been developed as more of a person in the second life. But that's not to say he did anything good in the second life. No, he did many things wrong. He did awful things in the second life. Abandoned everyone he once loved, and that some such. But by the end, it's hopeful. What can I say? And I like the fact that it's like hopeful enough, not very hopeful, and not like oh they're gonna die. Like they're gonna be completely happy. I like creators of happiness. So that's my rant review about starting over from Sugar Miaki. I also read Pain Pain Go Away, which I think was pretty fantastic too, but that I have a few gripes with. But obviously, Sugar Maki is a pretty capable writer. He knows how to write losers, and guess who's a big fan of that kind of thing? Probably the only one in the room right now. Yeah. All right. Read Sugar Maki's novels, such and such. Big fan of him. Starting over, didn't know that was a song from John Lennon or something until I read the book. What references? Keep being a loser if you want to. Nemesis out.